good morning and welcome to Frankly Speaking here on WYDC TV Big Fox. I'm your host, Frank Acom. We are broadcasting live from the Hesselson studio here on Market Street in Corning, and I'm so glad that you joined us this morning. I think you know what we'll be talking about, and that is the speech from Donald Trump yesterday, the joint session speech. A lot to dissect, a lot to discuss. I'm not going to say the coverage is all positive. That's impossible in the biased media landscape that we have. But as compared to the past, there seems to be a lot more coverage on the positives. We're going to talk about it. We're going to tell you what some had to say, some of the highlights from it. But first, comments from viewers after yesterday's program or right towards the end of yesterday's program. First up, good morning, Frank. Well, good morning. I see Hochul got a protest together inside the Capitol building in Albany to go against the guard strike. How low can she go? Well, I don't think numbers-wise she could have went much lower. I saw that in comparison. I know the media was highlighting the pro-HALT Act protesters inside the Capitol. Obviously putting them inside the Capitol to perhaps make them look like a larger group as compared to the guards and the massive amount of guards and support for the guards that were at the Capitol yesterday. I'm hoping we have an opportunity to talk about that a little bit later on in the program. So yes, I did see that coverage, and I also thought it was quite laughable how they tried to use almost camera manipulation to suggest that that was a protest even worth making a story over. The reason I say that is yesterday there were anti-Trump, anti-Musk, anti-Vance protests here on Market Street where the numbers were larger on Market Street in Corning than were pro-HALT inside the Capitol building, as far as I could tell from the camera angles. So yes, you raise a good point. It doesn't surprise me that Hochul's going that direction. She's going all in against the corrections officers. The first time she's really taken a strong stance and stuck with it. And it goes against law enforcement. So should come as no surprise. But yes, thank you for bringing that to our attention. The reason I say I'm hoping we can get to it is because later on in the program, in the 7 o'clock hour, we're going to be talking with John Burin. He is the majority leader in the Chemung County Legislature. We're going to be talking about solar panels and solar battery storage. I know this is a major issue. If you know a town supervisor, if you know someone on a town council, city council, I would highly recommend that you tell them to tune in right around 7:10, 7:15 to watch this interview so you can understand what is being done, what you can do to stop this from coming to your area. Okay, comments from other viewers. Boy, that lasted late last night, didn't it? From Litchfield. Hey, our friends in Pennsylvania, thanks for writing in. The Democrats should be absolutely ashamed. It was even more disgraceful than when Nancy Pelosi ripped up his speech. He called them out, and their true character was on full display for it. That even seems to be a common refrain amongst some that would not typically be a common refrain from. And we're going to show you and highlight those. President Trump's press team put together some of the highlights on that, but I've been scouring various news outlets all morning. Now, there are a lot, and we're going to get to those too to get your blood boiling, that did not like the speech. But I think the sentiment seems to be that Democrats overplayed their hand on this one. They were fitting into the narrative that not only Trump was highlighting, but also they were playing into some of the characteristics that cost them the election in November. Not just cost them, it was a landslide victory for Trump and his agenda. So we are going to talk about that as well, but I understand it is pretty sad when Nancy Pelosi ripping up the speech looks quaint, looks civilized. So you raise a good point. Comment from a different viewer. I'm so proud of President Trump and happy that I've lived to witness his greatness. He is also a very kind and thoughtful man. Thank you for that. Everybody stayed up late last night. And finally, last comment before we kick it all off. This just came in. I'm watching President Trump's address to Congress again. I absolutely loved it. Well, please pause it for 2 hours and then take it back up where you left off. You're not gonna want to miss this whole edition of Frankly Speaking, but I understand your enthusiasm on the speech. Trump hailed his whirlwind, and that's to put it lightly, 6-week, quote, common sense revolution as downbeat Democrats protest the address to Congress. Some were saying it looked very much like Parliament more than a speech by the president of the joint sessions of Congress. He boldly declared that America is back and its greatest era was underway. As he didn't, he brushed off those protesters, used it to his advantage numerous times. He described his avalanche of executive orders and new initiatives as a common sense revolution during the 99-minute speech. I know he said it before. This is just a quick side note. Where in the world does he get the energy? First of all, 99-minute speech would take, most people would be drained for the day. This is coming at the end of the day when he already had a very, very busy schedule. By the way, that's the longest speech in modern history. It echoed the theme of his second inaugural address as the opposition largely sat on their hands or seethed. And we're going to tell you examples of some of the times they did not clap, that the Democrat Party did not clap. I don't want to get into the habit here of just reading quotes from Trump. You saw the speech or are watching the speech currently. There are some that we need to highlight, but what I want to do is take a look at what some more left-leaning outlets like CNN had to say, what places like Fox had to say, then what elected representatives had to say, and others. But he kept highlighting the fact that we're on a comeback. He did list some of the orders, like making English the country's official language, renaming the Gulf of Mexico to the Gulf of America, ordering federal workers to return to offices, requiring the government to recognize only two genders, move to defund school districts that allow transgender athletes in girls' sports, and end diversity, equity, and inclusion programs. He also touted his forthcoming initiatives to sell $5 million gold cards to wealthy foreigners and plans to drop the high prices of eggs, which he blamed on former President Joe Biden. Now, Democrats, I guess the only way you could describe it is through a fit. And we're going to get to some examples of that in a moment. I don't want to go through too much of it. I know that Representative Melania Stansbury, again, because all of this is grandstanding. It's trying to get the media's attention so that you can fundraise off of it, or try to get the kind of radicals on social media to say this person cares the most. This person is the most agreed by Trump. And one of the people that did that kind of virtue signaling, if you were, Representative Melania Stansbury. She photobombed Trump's entrance into the chamber, brandishing a sign that read, "This is not normal," not underlined. So think of the strategic planning this took so that she could be behind Trump, get a photo. She's got a smirk on her face, and this now makes her kind of a hero amongst her friends, a hero amongst the Democrats that kind of threw this tantrum throughout the whole speech. And the number one most important thing, it will increase her fundraising capabilities. And don't think for a moment that's not what this normally is about. Rashida Tlaib had a whiteboard that said, "Start paying your taxes." I mean, it's all somewhat cliche and predictable, but to the extent, to the level that it was occurring, was frustrating. And many people highlighting, even Democrats, saying that was this the best tactic? Because if you read on Axios, they were reporting that many in the Democrat leadership were saying, don't do this kind of childish protest. Sure, dress in certain ways, meaning certain colors to represent certain beliefs that you have, but don't be completely disrespectful. Because I think some in leadership recognize that for a fringe group, this is what they want. They want the kind of childish protesting behavior. But for the overwhelming majority, some of the Democrats that ended up switching over to Trump because Trump perhaps got Robert F. Kennedy Jr. in or got Tulsi in the fold, you're not going to win them back. You're not going to win the moderates back. Now, there was Ukraine, I guess, was one of the most anticipated elements of the speech. And this is just to give you Media 101, and I've joked about it here on the program before, where I have a bad habit of not following Media 101. If I have a big guest on the program and there's the number one hot topic, for instance, when we want to ask Sheriff Allard about what's happening at the county, most people would say you wait till the end. You keep people hooked the whole time. I don't do that. I get right to it. But Trump, he knows the media. He waited 86 minutes into his speech to talk about the deal with Ukraine. And again, I'm not going to fall into the trap of just reading his comments, but what he said to Elizabeth Warren, we'll get to in a little bit. Talked about tax and tariffs, of course. These are some of the bigger takeaways from the New York Post. He highlighted DOGE spending cuts. Could you believe some of those cuts? Some of those highlighting some of the waste, fraud, and corruption? Well, some of the examples that he gave, we'll just run through them quickly because I'm already running late. That's the kind of program we're going to have this morning. $8 million to promote LGBTQ plus in the African nation of Lesotho, which nobody has ever heard of. That was Trump's exact quote, which it is about a 2 million person country surrounded by South Africa. $8 million for making mice transgender. Trump said this is real. $1.5 billion for voter confidence in Liberia. $59 million for illegal alien hotel rooms in New York City. $14 million for improving public procurement in Serbia. We found hundreds of billions of dollars of fraud, and we've taken back the money and reduced our debt to fight inflation and other things. I want to do what has not been done in 24 years, balance the federal budget. Wow, that's a powerful statement. And he's not pulling any punches. But to think of some of that waste, and remember what the media will say is, DOGE is suggesting, and don't quote me on the numbers here, DOGE is suggesting that they found $50 billion in waste, but it's only $16 billion in waste. Oh, okay, you got us. I'll take the $16 billion, and let's keep working towards that 50 then. How's that? It's amazing. He did take a victory lap on the border, and rightfully so. And he also, there were some very touching, heartfelt moments. We'll get to those as well. But when we come back, we're going to give you the takeaways from CNN, then the takeaways from Fox, and then dive into some of the more specifics of what happened. I'd love to hear your favorite parts, your least favorite parts, what you thought of the speech. If you want to change the topic, it may be tough this morning. We don't have a lot of time. But if you want to talk other topics as well, feel free to send that message in. You see the number on the bottom of your screen, 607-358-3131. I got a lot of waves coming in, so stay with us. We'll be right back with Frankly Speaking here on WYDC TV, Big Fox. The Frankly Speaking Roof Cam, brought to you by Boss Security in Horseheads. Contact them today for all your business and home security needs. We are back. We're proudly broadcasting live from the Hesselson studio here on Market Street Corning, and we're talking about the speech before a joint session of Congress by President Trump. Let's go to some viewer comments. Oh, this is in reference to the viewer who said that they were rewatching the speech. They loved it so much, and I had suggested pausing it, at least for Frankly Speaking, and they said, I've paused my rewatch of Trump's address. I stop everything for Frankly Speaking. I won't start my day without my 2 hours of Frankly Speaking. Very kind of you to say. Thank you very much. A comment from a different viewer. Good morning, Frank. Well, good morning. I watched the whole speech last night. I am so saddened by half of our Americans running our country. If they were one of my kids, I would have sent them all to their room. When the president talked about the people that had been through losing a child or a father, not one clap. They didn't have to stand, but they could have looked and smiled. That was unacceptable. To your point, the White House sent out, it's from the Office of Communications, and they sent out an email late last night, and it was titled, Democrats Showed Whose Side They're On, and it's not the American people. And they highlighted, and Dana Perino, you may have heard her say this yesterday, that the Democrat Party still has no common sense, they have no ideas, and they have no heart. They couldn't even stand for the most inspiring moments of the speech. Yes, it got to the point in the past, if you said something like, America's the greatest, and everybody both sides would cheer and all that. That looks as if to be a thing of the past. So what they did is they put together, to this viewer's point, very astute point, put together what Democrats refuse to applaud. So these are things, and this could take a whole break, that Democrats refuse to applaud. The capturing of an ISIS terrorist that masterminded the Abbey Gate attack. A young boy fighting brain cancer. We'll get to that in a little bit. A call to lower taxes for middle-class Americans. Americans joining the military in record numbers. They refused to clap law and order. Democrats refused to clap during taking down illegal revenge porn. That's a very important issue that Melania Trump has taken up and taken as a cause. They did not clap for protecting women's sports. They did not clap for the United States of America. This is a long list. They did not clap for working together to make America great again, nor ending the harmful electric vehicle mandate, cutting regulations to unleash American prosperity, ending censorship and bringing back free speech, ending discriminatory diversity, equity, and inclusion, recognizing only two sexes, defeating inflation, unleashing American energy, ending waste, fraud, and abuse in government, ending taxes on tips, overtime, and seniors' Social Security, bringing manufacturing home to America, securing historic investments in American chip manufacturing, removing illegal killers, rapists, and drug dealers from our streets, securing our border, declaring the brutal Tren de Aragua gang as a foreign terrorist organization. If you're just joining us, these are all the things that Democrats did not clap for during yesterday's speech. Waging war on the deadly cartels trafficking deadly drugs into our country, punishing cop killers with a death penalty, promoting health and wellness among Americans, protecting our kids from radical gender ideology, the return of the American Mark Fogel, declaring America's youth are perfect as God made them, ending wokeness in the U.S. military, restoring American shipbuilding, a student getting accepted into West Point, improving America's defenses, and finally pursuing peace in Ukraine. Those are the times that Democrats refused to applaud. Now, the takeaways from CNN during the address is they called it a partisan affair. From the almost the first words of Trump's speech, it was evident it would not resemble many addresses to Congress in the past. He boasted about his November election win, attacked Democrats for standing in his way, and complained they would never applaud his accomplishments. We're going to talk about that in a little bit. This is a common refrain from the media that does not know how to handle this because they know it resonates with the American people, a speech like this, so they don't know how to handle it. So what they call it is campaign mode. The Trump's always in campaign mode. He's no longer running for office. He operates as if he is. He talked about the rapid pace of change. Yet for many of the Americans, the flurry of changes has been confusing. Polls show skepticism seeping in about Trump's priorities. Tuesday's speech was an opportunity to present his argument. If there is confusion among the voter or the American people, it's the media's doing. Wanting it to be confusing, wanting it to look nefarious. So it's a little disingenuous to blame that on the president. And then that was at one point when members of Congress, again, wanting to, even standing up to make sure they have that picture that they hopefully can emblazon on a T-shirt and sell for fundraising purposes, had placards that said, "Musk steals." So those are somewhat of a changed world, and that was about Ukraine. And then they say that he blames it on Biden. Now, the Democrat response, I would also love to hear your thoughts on that. Democrats respond, it was Senator Elisa Stokin. She kept it short and to the point. She opened by accusing Trump and Musk of taking a reckless and chaotic approach to reforming the federal government. This is the problem that I had, and I think it was very, not only disrespectful, I would ask, who is a Democrat to make this statement or judge this? She alleged that Ronald Reagan would be, quote, rolling in his grave. This is a party, the Democrat Party, who has not wanted to see change in federal government. They want it to be a bloated federal government. They do not want to weed out the waste, fraud, and corruption. They made that clear last night, but throughout the month and a half of Trump's presidency, and before that, of course, as well, but it's on full display. So to then invoke the name of Ronald Reagan and what he would believe, I think, is disrespectful in the least. I think it is disgraceful. She acknowledged Americans want change, but in her telling, the change Trump is executing risks fundamental damage to the country. So what she's perhaps suggesting is, we'll change it, but let's keep changing it the way the Democrats want it, which is to add more to the bloated government, to make it more in line with the socialistic views that they have been pushing that failed so miserably at the ballot box. Now, when we come back, we're going to take a look at the other side of the coin, which is the top 5 moments from Trump's address to the joint session of Congress coming from Fox. And then we're going to dive into some of the nitty-gritty. What was your favorite part? What was your least favorite part? Let me know. And also, what you thought of the response. Is that frozen? Okay, we're on. That's all right. That's interesting. Maybe I can go to a break. We're going to give this a shot. We'll be right back. Hold on. We're going to do, yeah, there we go. We'll be right back with Frankly Speaking here on WYDC TV, Big Fox. The Frankly Speaking Roof Cam brought to you by Boss Security and Horseheads. Contact them today for all your business and home security needs. Welcome back as we are broadcasting live from the Hesselson studio on Market Street in Corning. We're talking about Trump's address to the joint session of Congress. A couple comments from viewers. Trump's speech, again, exposed to Democrats' total lack of a moral compass. When you stand for nothing, you stand for nothing. Very good point. I like how you put that. Mark writes in, those Democrats that refuse to applaud Trump's speech must like waste and corruption. Also, it was so disrespectful. Yes, it is awkward to watch them defend this waste, fraud, and corruption. It's like I said with the media. Well, it wasn't $80 billion they found that was wasted. It's only $20 billion or whatever number they find. Okay? So that's a problem? I'm confused. At least someone's actually trying to do something. You know, when the person that gave the response after said that Americans want change. Well, when were you going to do that? And now that there is change coming and they're cutting the waste, fraud, and corruption, now there's outrage over it. So that goes to prove there would never be anything changed. And to this viewer's point that said maybe more, well, let me get to it. All politicians should follow Trump's example. They need to operate in campaign mode all the time. Maybe more of them would keep their promises that they make. The problem is, and I don't disagree with you, Trump's the one that makes good on his campaign promises. So the rest are running on campaign, just like in the response, saying that, acknowledging that the Americans want change. So what happens every 4 years, every 2 years, depending on the election, every 6 years, they come out and say, we're going to change, we're going to fix the government, we're going to fix what ails you, and then they just go back and do things as normal while still pushing campaign slogans like we saw from the Democrats yesterday. But the difference with Trump and what drives the media and the Democrats crazy is when he makes a campaign promise and they'll laugh at it and go, oh, he'll never accomplish that. And then he gets in there and does or works on it with all his ability. It drives them crazy. That's not how things are supposed to be done. Presidents are supposed to say things, presidential candidates are supposed to say things on the campaign trail, and the media, wink, wink, nudge, nudge. We know that's never going to happen, so we're fine. Comment from a different viewer. The Democrats' lack of response was very childish. Like a kid that didn't get their way would be pouting. Yes. And Jack says, speaking of Ronald Reagan, he would repeat his famous slogan, government is there to protect the people, not run their lives. Yes, government is not the solution to the problem. Government is the problem. So the top 5 moments from Trump's address to the joint session of Congress. According to Fox News, 1, Trump sets speech record while declaring America is back. It was an hour and 40 minutes. Starting and declaring at the beginning of his speech, to my fellow citizens, America is back. 6 weeks ago, I stood beneath the dome of this Capitol and proclaimed the dawn of the golden age of America. From that moment on, it has been nothing but swift and unrelenting action to usher in the greatest and most successful era in the history of our country. We have accomplished more in 43 days than most administrations accomplish in 4 years or 8 years, and we are just getting started. The second takeaway was the sergeant at arms escorting Representative Al Green out and the Democrats' protest with signs and the disruptions. Speaker of the House Mike Johnson ordered the sergeant at arms to remove Democrat Texas Representative Al Green after he repeatedly shouted during Trump's opening remarks. This is typical of Al Green. He's kind of a showboater. He's already called for Trump's impeachment, I think, 3 times in, 43 days? So it doesn't come as a surprise. It's just the disrespectful nature Johnson said members are engaging in willful and continuing breach of decorum, and the chair is prepared to direct the sergeant at arms to restore order to the joint session. Mr. Green, take your seat. And then, of course, he was escorted out. Then you have some Democrats that warned their colleagues against protesting Trump ahead of the speech. Nancy Pelosi, for example, saying that they should let him stew in his own juice. Democrats, however, protested nonetheless, including remaining seated as Trump celebrated his policies. Imagine that. The ones that we just mentioned, some of those positive, amazingly positive things that they could not clap for or stand for. So that, I guess, tradition is kind of over. And I think Nancy Pelosi did herself a disservice there, because the kind of the far left fringe that seems to be running the Democrat Party today does not want it to be like the old way of doing things. They believe these protests, this kind of snarkiness, this kind of make sure I get a great photo for my Facebook or Instagram showing how much I hate the president. That's in vogue. That's popular amongst that fringe. That, I don't believe, is the majority of the Democrat Party in America. It's definitely not the majority of Americans since November. But the ones running the show want to go more the AOC route than the Nancy Pelosi route. Number 3, Trump honors young woman killed by illegal immigrants. Trump honored the lives of Laken Riley and Jocelyn Nungari, who both were brutally killed by illegal immigrants under the Biden administration. He even included naming an animal refugee after Nungari. There were so many touching moments in this. Number 4, Trump reveals top terrorist behind Abbey Gate attack was apprehended. Again, not receiving any round of applause from the Democrat Party. And number 5 is, I don't know if there was a dry eye in anyone's house. There was in the Capitol or in the House where he gave a speech because, of course, we said the Democrats would not stand for some of the most touching moments, would not clap for some of the most important moments. Now, you expect it when it's a very partisan issue. You don't necessarily expect it when it's something like this, for example. Trump makes DJ Daniel, a 13-year-old with cancer, an honorary Secret Service agent. He's always dreamed of becoming a police officer. But in 2018, DJ was diagnosed with brain cancer. The doctors gave him 5 months at most to live. That was more than 6 years ago. Since that time, DJ and his dad have been on a quest to make his dream come true. He talked about the honorary. He recounted how Daniel had been made an honorary member of other law enforcement agencies across the country, and they all praised his spirit. And tonight, DJ, we're going to do you the biggest honor of them all, Trump said. I'm asking our new, I got goosebumps. I'm asking our new Secret Service Director, Sean Curran, to officially make you an agent of the United States. That's when chants from Republicans started with DJ. So he became an agent, Secret Service agent of the United States. Curran then handed Daniel a badge, making him an honorary member of the Secret Service. Daniel probably waved the new badge around with a stunned look on his face. What a touching moment. And just to show you how, number one, the Democrats clearly last night didn't know how to handle it, but also the media doesn't know how to handle it. What is your response to that? Is your response to get political? Well, if you're in the joint session of Congress and you're a representative, you don't clap for that, you don't stand for that, you don't cheer for that. If you're on MSNBC and you're Nicole Wallace, you say the following. Let's just stick with DJ. Again, DJ is the new honorary Secret Service agent. I mean, I think that if there was a moment where your whole body could relax and you could celebrate someone, it was a 13-year-old cancer survivor who would like to be a police officer. It was a genuinely beautiful moment. And then the moment that probably was most familiar to the State of the Union address were both a part of it. Problem is, in the beauty of that child, here we go. The problem is, in the beauty of that child is the tragedy of the Trump presidency. Because he won't know how he survived pediatric cancer. We don't know how he survived pediatric cancer, but it's likely he benefited from some sort of cancer research. And it is a fact that Trump has slashed cancer research. It's a fact by eliminating NIH and by all the cuts, pediatric cancer trials are halted. She continued, God willing, he won't need any more treatment, but if he does, I hope the NIH wasn't responsible for anything that let him live this long. He also talked about wanting anyone who murdered a cop to receive the death penalty. But Donald Trump's first action was to pardon all of the January 6th insurrectionists who assaulted and violently beat cops. I think this was a lesson in finding one thing that you let yourself feel. I let myself feel joy about DJ, and I hope he's alive for another 95 years, right? And I hope he lives in the life he wants to live. He wants to be a cop. He knows what he wants to do. And maybe when you have childhood cancer, that crystallizes you. And I hope he has a long life as a law enforcement officer. But I hope he never has to defend the United States Capitol against Donald Trump's supporters. And if he does, I hope he isn't one of the 6 who loses his life to suicide. And I hope he isn't one who has to testify against the people who carried out acts of sedition and then live to see Donald Trump pardon those people. So I know it's 6:35, and I'm not trying to outrage you this morning, but the media's response, and they wonder why they've lost all credibility, why they're hemorrhaging viewers. MSNBC's Nicole Wallace is concerned that that young cancer survivor might kill himself over something like January 6th, or that he would have never made it this long, or may not make it as long as she hopes because of Trump's cuts, because of, I guess, blaming Doge. Imagine that's your first thought when you see that touching moment. Many of you, I'm sure, shed a tear or got the goosebumps like I stated just reading that statement. Not Nicole Wallace. That's where their head jumps to, folks. Keep that in mind when we're talking about the media. But we've got to take a short break. Stay with us. We'll be right back with Frankly Speaking here on WYDC TV, Big Fox. The Frankly Speaking Roof Cam brought to you by Boss Security and Horseheads. Contact them today for all your business and home security needs. We are broadcasting live from the Hesselson studio here on Market Street in Corning. Let's go through some viewer comments. First up, good morning, Frank. Well, good morning to you. I didn't get any substance from the speech. It was nothing more than a partisan pep rally. I do support the president, but that was just a waste of 2 hours of time, an hour 40 now. We try to be accurate here on the program. Thank you for your comment. Comment from a different viewer. At Trump's speech last night, when talking about tax cuts, he should have said, if you're for tax cuts, please stand up. I think it would have got the same responses you got on most of what he said. They would not stand. Okay, Ken writes in, and we know Ken does. This is not the dirty work in this scenario. Ken watched the State of the Union address last night, and he put together his highlights. Ken writes, the Democrats started immediately with shouting and disrupting the chamber. Congressman Al Green refused to come to order and was removed from the chamber. The Democrats periodically shouted and continually held up signs, mostly saying false or liar. The Democrats sat on their hands during the entire speech, even when Trump was honoring the families that lost someone to illegal immigrants and the young boy that had brain cancer, who Trump inducted into being an honorary Secret Service agent. Trump reviewed the work that he and his team have done over the last 5 weeks. For anyone that has been paying attention, there was nothing really new. That's almost to that other person's view. I got the biggest chuckle out of Trump noting that Democrats aren't in a hurry to end the Ukraine war. And I'm going to just quote it exactly here. He specifically called out Elizabeth Warren. He said, the United States has sent hundreds of billions of dollars to support Ukraine's defense. You want to keep it going for another 5 years? And then he looked at Elizabeth Warren clapping and says, Pocahontas says yes. That's when Warren clapped enthusiastically and even upped the pace of her clapping with a grin on her face. Now Trump has branded Warren Pocahontas for years because of controversial claims of having partial Native American heritage in her remarks to the University of Pennsylvania and Harvard Law Schools, institutions she taught at in the 80s and 90s. Okay, back to Ken. Sorry. Trump reviewed the work that he and his team have done. Oh, God, I already went there. Rightly so, Trump continually called the Democrats out for degrading the country during the past 4 years and their despicable conduct during his address. We're going to get to that in a moment as well. The Democrat rebuttal was filled with lies and can be summed up in a few words. Trump and Republicans are bad and the Democrats are good. I can't imagine how any American can watch how the Democrats acted during the address to the nation and not be incredibly concerned. And they are the people that are impartial in charge of running this great country. Ken, you raise a good point. And there was a lot of people saying very similar that they really outkicked their coverage. They overplayed their hand. Some even calling Trump's speech a masterclass. Boy, are we going to struggle with time today. I like that Trump brought up Greenland, too, by the way. One way or another, we're going to get it. So I mentioned Al Green removed, part of that protest. Trump had said, and this is in kind of what reference to what Ken had said, Trump said, "This is my fifth such speech to Congress. And once again, I look at the Democrats in front of me and I realize there's absolutely nothing I can say to make them happy or to make them stand or smile or applaud. I can find a cure to the most devastating disease, a disease that could wipe out our entire nation, or announce the answers to the greatest economy in history, or the stoppage of crime to the lowest levels ever recorded. And these people sitting right here will not clap, will not stand, and certainly will not cheer for these astronomical achievements." It's very sad, he said, and it just shouldn't be that way. It's even worse now, in a way, because in the past there was times that, it didn't matter who was in charge. When Biden gave a speech, and if he said something about America's greatness, Republicans would stand up. If, George W. Bush gave a speech and said something about, we're going to get who's responsible for 9/11. Of course, Democrats would stand up. Under Trump, it's a whole new ball of wax. It's a whole new set of rules. They're not willing to stand, unless, of course, that is to stand to hold one of the placards, one of the signs that says Musk steals, or protect veteran, or whatever, save Medicaid. If they stand with that, then they know, and I'm looking at one of the pictures right here. Then they know they'll have a picture taken of them, and they'll probably get a lot of media coverage. They'll probably be on the front of magazines and newspapers. So that's when they stand. But again, and Ken, to your response, that at the end, the rebuttal, if you will, I just can't get over Senator Lee Slotkin, having the audacity to invoke Reagan. That bothers me. But Reagan must be rolling in his grave, she said. Now, Stephen Collinson blames the divide on Trump. A little victim blaming here. Modern American political chasm never looked so bleak. And he goes on saying, how dare they chant USA, USA and Trump. His speech was indistinguishable from his campaign rallies. But the trinity of the president, vice president, and speaker on the House dais spoke of unbridled GOP power, as Senate Majority Leader John Thune and conservative Supreme Court justices looked on from below. So what he's suggesting is Democrats' lack of power is laid bare, and that's why you're maybe seeing kind of the temper tantrum, if you will. The state of Democrats is impotent, he says. Most opposition parties' top figures didn't even bother to show up. Those who did mostly sat stone-faced, rigid, and silent in their seats. But Texas Representative Al Green stood and heckled Trump, shaking his cane and ignoring Speaker Johnson's call for him to sit down. He was ejected by heavies from the office of the Sergeant at Arms, to hoots and hollers from the Republican benches. It was an ugly, angry scene, but did much to personify the country's divides. Well, I know that I'm not suggesting there isn't a divide, but you're still talking about a person that won in a landslide. So how do you blame Trump for Johnson's heckling? That seems like a weird way to twist yourself up into a pretzel. I don't want to go through all this. It's all about, to Ken's point, how bad Trump is. Jake Tapper saying it was just a campaign speech. Well, we'll give you a few more responses, and we'll give you some Republican responses as well. Keep those comments coming in. What was your thoughts of yesterday's speech? If we have an opportunity, there are some New York State issues, specifically with the corrections officers. Of course, yesterday they went to Albany. And the media did like to highlight the much smaller pro-halt protesters in the Capitol. But what outstanding pictures of the COs and their supporters in Albany. I saw a little bit of the speech from Senator Tom O'Mara, who we're scheduled to have on the program very soon. So it was nice to see that huge support, as we've seen over and over again, the support by the community. So we may talk about that as well. But keep your comments coming in. What was your thoughts of last night's speech to the joint session of Congress? Stay with us. We'll be right back with Frankly Speaking here on WYDC TV, Big Fox. As always, thank you to our friends from Boss Security and Horseheads for bringing us that beautiful view of historic Market Street in Corning as we broadcast live from the Hesselson studio here on Market Street, as I just said. CNN's Casey Hunt. She called yesterday's speech divisive, partisan, cruel. The bottom line here, the big picture, this was an incredibly divisive speech. Do you see a scenario where a speech that Trump gives, no matter what it is about, kind of to Trump's point exactly, that she wouldn't call it divisive? It's divisive because she doesn't like what he had to say. I mean, but I'll continue. You saw the division on display from the Democrats as well. That reflects an incredibly divided America, and one that is still, very much reeling from a series of economic challenges and our own challenges with the COVID pandemic. I think there's still an element of all the things that were brought to our reality, to our culture, that we are not over yet, that is driving some of the division that was on display, but also the general kind of unhappiness and feeling of, morass in America and in the American public. Since I started doing it when George W. Bush was president of the United States, I didn't think I'd ever seen something that was so pointed, so partisan, not just in what the president was saying, but in the mood of the room, the sort of aggression, the occasional cruelty, the mocking, the laughter. It had a tone. I mean, these are usually moments for at least all of us to say, okay, maybe I may not agree with you, Mr. President. I may have differences on that policy, but we're going to stand here at the top and we're going to say this is about our union, right? The thing that we all can get together on, and there was none of that. So who is she putting the blame on? It sounds there that she should be saying the Democrats, but I think she may be saying Trump. Ex-Democrat Representative Harold Ford Jr. said, and he's a Democrat from Tennessee. Did I mention that? He said, I'd say this to my party. We have to win on ideas. The disruption was not a good look for the Congress. And as passionate as Congressman Green may have felt, that was not the right moment to do that. He didn't really try to bring the country together with rhetoric. He really tried to bring the country together around stories about people. The real work will start tomorrow, and we'll see how it goes. But congratulations to the president tonight. Michael Goodwin said in normal times, the run-up to a presidential address to Congress would be filled with reports and guesses about what the president would say. There was plenty of that this week. But an inordinate amount of the focus in Washington was on how Democrats would react to Donald Trump. And if you noticed yesterday, there was a major piece in Axios where leadership was saying, don't be this aggressive. They ended up being that aggressive. How would they boycott? How would they dress? Would they hoot and holler? Or maybe march out in an organized protest? In the end, it didn't matter. They were a sad, shrunken presence, especially after one of their main members, Representative Al Green, got himself ejected early on by repeatedly interrupting. He was the lucky one. Those Democrats who stayed were like a fish out of water, waving their silly little paddles and representing nothing except resistance to whatever Trump said or did. Yes, this did not seem as a reasonable protest in the sense that making the argument. It was just about going against everything Trump said, as he pointed out specifically, playing right into his hands. And I would point to Stephen Collinson's article where he said when you see the optics of Donald Trump, Speaker Johnson, and Vice President J.D. Vance, you see how out of power the Democrats are. And then when you see the response during the speech, it kind of puts a level of sad to it, or pathetic may be the word. They earned their trip to the political wilderness, and Tuesday proved they are not yet ready to emerge as a constructive opposition party. Meanwhile, the president they love to hate put on a show for the ages. This is Michael Goodwin from the New York Post. No commander-in-chief in modern times has seized the reins of power with such gusto and delivered such immediate results. True to form, Trump wasn't shy about saying so. Watching him recount the success, especially on the border, and mix it with touching tributes to widows and families who lost loved ones to crime, I couldn't help but think of the title of a Tom Wolfe novel, A Man in Full. We are witnessing a president at the top of his game, clear-eyed and confident about himself and his agenda. He put on a masterclass in presidential leadership in what was a speech for the ages. Most times, a political address of 90 minutes would feel like an eternity. In the hands of Trump, it felt like a well-paced adventure through the dreams, hopes, and tragedies of the people inhabiting the most important nation on earth. The Trump on that stage is not just the dominant figure in American life. It's in 6 short weeks, he has put our nation at the center of the world and made America important again. To be sure, this is not how the lefty media will describe it. They came with the knives out and will nit and pick at every loose thread to call him a liar and worse. They will carve up everything he said and didn't say. No matter. The train has left the station, and the dogs can bark all they want. Reflect what I regard as a different president from the first term. Trump acknowledged that the tariffs he's imposing will cause some rough spots. Bear with me, he said. An appeal that struck me as both proper and necessary because trade wars can be messy. Similar, he was gracious about his feud with Ukrainian President Zelensky because Zelensky, according to a message he sent Tuesday, seems to have come to his senses and realized that his country doesn't have a prayer if he loses American support. Europe is a nice second level of support, but cannot match America's might and power. The entire episode is a clear example of Trump sticking to his guns despite the political fallout with Democrats, which is so refreshing from past Republican presidents who would cave so, like a George W. Bush or whoever, would cave so frequently if the media turned on them a little bit or the Democrats turned on him a little bit. Trump has never been concerned with that. But as Michael Goodman said, that's where the Democrats are. They are irrelevant because they stand for nothing except that they are against everything Trump is for. There's no future in that, and their sad performance Tuesday night proved they have learned nothing. Yes, the soul searching that we all questioned would it happen seems to have not happened after November, but wow, we got to take a short break. Stay with us. The Frankly Speaking Roof Cam, brought to you by Boss Security and Horseheads. Contact them today for all your business and home security needs. We are back wrapping up hour number one. Couple quick comments from viewers. One viewer writes, Democrats acted like little brat children. Thank you. Comment from Mark. He says, Trump making that brain cancer boy's day was great, wasn't it? And for the media to turn it around to suit them is not. So let me get this right. They will do anything to cut down Trump. That's what that proves. For Nicole Wallace to use that amazing story, and she tries to say at first she forgot about everything she dislikes about the president, but she took that in, she took that joy in of him receiving that honor, and then goes on to say that, you know, he'll probably always have, or that he'll have problems in the future with his cancer, or wouldn't have been around as long if it would have been the cuts that Trump has proposed, because remember, they don't want any cuts. And then goes on to say that, and this is horrible, that he would have potentially committed suicide if he was a Secret Service agent during January 6th. I mean, the disgracefulness knows no bounds. The old, if they go low, we go high, that Michelle Obama claimed was going to be the case, that has gone a long time ago. When we come back, waving outside. Some of the waves are, if you're new to the program, some of the waves on the bottom of the screen are emojis that are coming in, and some are waves from people on the street. Coming up in the next hour, we're going to be talking with John Burin, the majority leader for the Chemung County Legislature. We're going to find out about solar panels and solar battery storage and some of the dealings that he's had in this and what has been happening to some local residents. So that'll be coming up as well. Also, I do want to touch on the corrections officers strike at some point because the Steuben County Sheriff's Office released their newsletter, and they had very nice words to say about that. I want to highlight that if we have an opportunity. Also, what a good job that Senator Tom O'Mara did yesterday in the clips that I saw from the rally in Albany. So you can weigh in on that as well, because we stand with our corrections officers as they go through this and what their families are going through. So sad. But we are going to talk more about Trump's speech last night. So stay with us. Hour number one in the books. Hour number two, mere moments away. And again, John Burin is going to be our guest in just a little bit. So stay with us. This is Frankly Speaking here on WYDC TV, Big Fox. Hour number two of Frankly Speaking, broadcasting live from the Hesselson studio here on Marcus Street in Corning. We have a lot left to get to on the president's speech last night. I would love to hear your thoughts on it. As I said, John Burin is going to be our guest here in just a little bit. I've got to admit, this is a first in this segment from a viewer. A viewer has written in, and I tried to, as long as things are clean and coherent. I always try to read comments no matter what the position. This is the first time that we have received one that has not seemed to be on the side, does not seem to be on the side of the corrections officers. And when I say seem, clearly not. This is what the viewer says. As far as the strike here in New York with corrections officers, give me a break. Our taxes pay these corrections officers, and they chose their careers. You know the dangers of being a corrections officer, cop, FBI, military, etc. You can get hurt, stabbed, shot, and die. Nobody made them choose their career. Get back to work or get fired and lose your job, your pay, and your benefits. I will say that as a first, if you're just tuning in, I want to make crystal clear, that was the view of a viewer. That was the opinion of a viewer. As we read comments on this program, if you are new to the show, that's what that number on the bottom of the screen is for. Reach out with comments. So in that gives me an excuse to bring up and change for just a moment the topic from the president's speech. Hundreds of prison guards flooded the Capitol yesterday as the Wildcat strike stretched into its 16th day. Protesters demanding Governor Hochul and New York legislators repeal a law limiting the use of solitary confinement as well as improve working conditions. I think the media does a huge disservice. Number one, many are not reporting on it statewide. But also they do a huge disservice for not mentioning the overtime requirements, the mandatory overtime. Not only the safety factor, but also the fact that I think most of us put in a position where we had to work 24 to 36 hours straight would be outraged and wouldn't have lasted as long as these corrections officers who are also now in harm's way, also surrounded by people that hate them. The strike, where 9 out of 10 guards have participated, continued. Hochul said late last week that she reached a deal with the union, but as we know, the union never spoke for the corrections officers that were a part of the strike in the first place. I don't need to give you the whole history. Joe Pinion, a Saratoga-based Newsmax commentator and former Republican candidate for senator, said, "They have threatened you with jail," he said at the rally. "They have threatened to take away your family's health insurance. You've got nothing left to do now but hold the line." Nicole, the wife of a corrections officer, addressed the crowd and spoke about her husband's work at a prison more than 2 hours from their home. She said sometimes he'll be gone for 14 days at a time, missing holidays, birthdays, and other life moments with their kids. Quote, "How could they walk into a very dangerous situation day after day when their hearts are miles away, aching for their loved ones? The very institution that preaches rehabilitation and stability refuses to provide it to its own employees, the same basic considerations." And I do think it's interesting at a time when you have Governor Hochul pushing, as we have in New York State for a long time, universal health care, and everybody should get health care. And then as a threat, takes away health care of corrections officers and their families. It's interesting that this has been the hill where Hochul wants to plant her flag. Another striking corrections officer said he actually returned to work on Saturday but refused to come back after he was almost immediately threatened by prisoners. "I feel safer out here fighting for my rights than I would in there." You think about and hold the line, that chant could be heard throughout the rally. And think about those National Guard. I mean, when are they out? They didn't train for this. Imagine you're 18 years old and you join the National Guard and now you're in charge of prisons? You are in a prison for something you've never been trained for. Now, again, and Hochul, instead of meeting with corrections officers, of course, as we know, Governor Hochul met with fired federal workers, people that were fired by DOJ, met with them at a round table to see how she could get them on board to work for the state, not corrections officers, but to work for the state. And I wanted to mention this, two things on this. Sheriff Allard and the Office of the Sheriff of Steuben County sent out their newsletter, which I talk about in our interviews a lot. And I just thought this was nice to kind of, and this will be our last statement on this, and we're going to get back to the speech. But he said, "In February's, our brothers and sisters in New York State DOCCS faced the cold weather from a picket line. With never before seen levels of violence in our state prisons and never before seen levels of mandatory overtime, our New York State corrections officers became so desperate that they went on strike rather than continue to work in unworkable conditions. Our hearts go out to the officers, their families, and communities, which all suffer from the lack of basic safety and security in their workforce. workplace, We also fear for the National Guardsmen who have never been, and in many cases, flown into state prisons to attempt to perform a job that takes years to master. Imagine being an 18-year-old guardsman who last week was in college or stocking shelves, and is now performing security in a state prison with murderers, rapists, and other convicted felons. Imagine that person being sent in with little to no training, defenseless, and completely unprepared for what they are about to see. It is extremely difficult to picture any leader condoning these actions, ignoring the rights of the corrections officers, and intentionally placing guardsmen into such a dangerous and ill-prepared situation. Yet, here we are, and by all indications, here we will stay for quite some time, unless a true leader emerges at the state level. So thank you to Steuben County Sheriff Jim Allard. By the way, I forgot to mention this. I can't believe it. We were talking, I can't remember who I was talking to about this. I probably must have been something with Phil Palmisano. But the Hornell Republican Party held their Lincoln Day dinner. It's kind of the kickoff to the election season. It's one of, if not the biggest Republican events in our area. Big dinner. And Sheriff Allard received the Republican of the Year award. So congratulations to the sheriff. I forgot to mention that on yesterday's program, but a big kudo to the sheriff winning the Republican of the Year award. Also, since we're on kind of a different tangent here, because as I mentioned, John Burin is going to be our guest here in just a little bit to talk about solar panels. We're going to read your comments as well, so don't worry. But yesterday's wasn't the only big speech. Trump's wasn't the only big speech. I want to thank the Elmira Rotary Club for having me there yesterday. I had a great time with everybody in the group. What a nice group, a welcoming group, and I really enjoyed my time. So I just wanted to make sure that I took a second to just thank the Elmira Rotary Club for inviting me to give a little speech. Okay, let's hear from our local representative, Congressman Nick Langworthy. Now, I mentioned yesterday there were some protests here on Market Street against Trump and against, well, really calling for, at least at one point, going down to the congressional office and asking for, or demanding, I guess would be a better word, town hall meetings. We could talk about that. There's a piece that is suggesting the leadership in the Republican Party is suggesting it's not a smart use of taxpayers' dollars to have these town halls, because really all it is to be used as a viral video. And we had talked about this a long time ago, so we were ahead of the curve on this, where it was organized groups that could come together at these town halls, and they're not there to listen and have a conversation. They're there to shout and scream, and then they get their video, just like we saw from the Democrats in Congress yesterday, get their video that they can put on Facebook and look like they care the most. Well, Congressman Langworthy, of course, was at yesterday's joint address, and he had this to say. Under the Trump administration, the American dream is being renewed. I was honored to be seated on the House floor, to hear President Trump's remarks live, and I know America's best days are ahead. The State of the Union is on a path back to strength, and it has only been 44 days. His speech was inspiring and exactly what the American people needed to hear, highlighting the very best of our country. I was discouraged and appalled by Democrats' reprehensible conduct, from disrespectfully interrupting the president mid-speech to intentionally sitting during the announcement of the terrorists behind the Abbey Gate bombing. Despite what the other side thinks or does, I look forward to continuing to work with the Trump administration to secure the border, bring investments in manufacturing back to the U.S., and restore a common sense approach to spending. So thank you to Congressman Nick Langworthy. We're going to read some more of your comments, but first, when we come back, we're going to be talking with John Burin, the majority leader for the Chemung County Legislature, so you can find out more about what is happening with the solar panels in your area. This is a major issue, folks. This is not one you want to take lightly, so we're glad that he could be on the program. That's coming up after this. Stay with us. This is Frankly Speaking. Welcome back to Frankly Speaking here on WYDC TV Big Fox. I'm your host, Frank Aiken. We're broadcasting from the Hesselson studio, and joining us in that studio, John Burin, the Chemung County Legislative Majority Leader. Welcome to the show.
Well, thank you very much.
It's a little different than our old radio days together, isn't it?
Yes,
yeah.
It is.
But I'm so glad that you could be on, because we talked with Assemblyman Phil Palmisano and so many other guests about solar farms, battery storage, and I know you've been dealing kind of with this firsthand and witnessing it. What are you hearing on the grounds when it comes with concerns regarding a solar farm and lithium-ion battery storage?
Yeah. Well, the bigger concern is the battery storage of so the dangerous. Two, and the battery storage. Quite frankly, I think that first came around in 2018, 2019. I'm told that those battery storage containers, now these are the size of a tractor trailer.
Right.
Okay, I mean, they're big. And I'm told that they have a life of around 20 years. So we're into it maybe 25%. And there's been failures.
Yes.
And so the demand has exceeded, well, the push, let me put it that way, the push has exceeded the technology. And it's very concerning.
And that's a good point. We might talk about that in a little bit. This push that I don't think the technology is there, but that's my opinion. But when it comes to storage, there's real safety concerns, not just for individuals, but also the environment. That's what's so ironic kind of about this whole push.
Yeah. So, you know, I'm hearing just recently there have been fires with these containers. And it's very intense. The heat is very intense, and you cannot put water on these. Once they go, you can't put water on them because they're storing power.
Right.
If you throw water on it, you're going to get electrocuted.
Right, exactly.
So they have to contain the area around, and a container could burn for 4 or 5 days before, and it can reignite. They produce their own oxygen, I guess.
That's very interesting.
Yeah, and so. You're throwing water all around, and as you're doing that, the containers are burning, things are emitting into the air. Now, the concern is what's going into the air.
Right.
And, you know, you hear there's hazardous material, ash, and so on, and the ash comes down, the fallout comes down, and there's pollutants, and people within a certain radius, living within a certain radius of are either told to secure in place or evacuate. I'm being told now by the solar people that while there really isn't a problem with anything being in the air, it's just an overreaction and so on. Well, maybe, but I don't know about that.
But I still think residents have a right to be concerned. And in some of these cases, and some towns and areas have been proactive on this, but you're talking real residential areas. I read that there's one next to gas stations, next to schools. Not in our area, but in New York State, maybe in our area. But it just seems like, going back to your point about technology, they've demanded so much, and we're not ready for it yet, that it's kind of like the wild, wild west right now.
It's exactly what it is. Now, you talk about residential areas. Well, I'm dealing with one in the town of Elmira. Now, I'm a legislator in the city of Elmira, District 9. District 9 borders this property in the town of Elmira, and I have a small section of the town of Elmira that is also part of my district. But my district borders this property that they're proposing for a solar farm and battery storage component. Now, it's in a residential neighborhood. It's 24 acres.
Yeah.
It's large lot residential. Ag residential is what the actual zone is. 24 acres of forest that they're going to clear cut to accommodate a solar farm.
Yeah.
It doesn't make sense.
No.
But they're pushing hard. The town is very much behind this project. And the way they rolled it out was very, very concerning.
Do the residents have any say? Because I imagine if you move into a neighborhood, depending on how long you've been there, whether it's a day or it's 6 years, 10 years, you probably didn't expect to have a solar farm in your backyard. And never mind what we were talking about earlier with the battery storage and the safety issues there. Do they have any say in this?
Well,
is that a loaded question?
Well, let me take a step back on that and tell you what happened. The town when the project came forward to the town planning board, the town board referred it to the town planning board. The town planning board then had a public hearing. And what they did was they contacted people within 200 feet of the project.
Okay.
Now, 200 feet, that comes from their zoning ordinances, which is decades old.
Yeah.
200 feet from the project, and they put a legal notice in the paper. Now, there's not many people reading the paper anymore.
Not for legal notices either.
And then you throw the legal notice on top. So they did that, and they had 5 people show up. One was the attorney representing the owner of the land.
Sure.
And then 4 people who received this notice for being 200 feet away. I then, when I found out about this, this was January when I found out about it, I called the town and I said, could I come to the next planning board meeting and speak? Then they said, you can come to the next planning board meeting, but the public comment portion is now closed.
Okay.
But if you'd like to submit something in writing, you can do that. So we had our own public meeting.
Yeah, good.
And we had almost 200 people come
Wow.
to that meeting. We also invited the town planning board and the town board to that meeting. Town planning board did not come. I think they were advised by the town attorney or the planning board attorney not to come. The town board did come, did not speak, did not, they heard what was going on, no comments, no nothing. And when it was over, they left. We got a petition together. There was a meeting just last week. We spoke at that meeting. We probably had 60 people at that meeting.
Wow.
We had almost 300 signatures, and we asked them if they would consider a moratorium, and one of the town board members afterward, they denied the moratorium, moving forward with the moratorium, and one of the town board members was asked, well, aren't you here to represent the people?
Right.
You had almost 300 signatures. You've had about 200 people that are all against this. And his response was, well, there's 6,000 people in the town. That's a very small percentage.
Yeah. Well, that's one way of looking at it.
I guess, yeah.
But I do think it's interesting, and this isn't just about town of Elmira, but when you talk about public hearings, notice the difference when you put it out the way maybe you want to put it out, and then when the word actually spreads. And I think that's unfortunate, and that's why on this program I've encouraged people. It's difficult, I know, but to keep up to date on this, to try to find any avenue you can go to find out about public hearing, because a lot of times by the time you know of a project or a plan, it's too late.
Yeah, to that point,
Yeah.
I contacted an attorney who's an expert, and he really is. I mean, the guy is a PhD. He's a guru in this stuff. And when I called him and told him where we were in this project, he said to me, I wish you had called me earlier because the train has left the station.
Yeah. That's heartbreaking.
Yeah. Oh, it was.
And it leaves, unfortunately, residents that leave such a bad taste in their mouth that it feels like something, and I'm not suggesting that's what happened, but it feels like something was done intentionally not to have them know about the hearings.
Well, I said this publicly. When you're elected, when you're an elected official and you're sitting in that seat, you have a moral and ethical obligation to make sure that the word is out, that people do know what's going on. You need to go beyond that legal notice.
Right.
And when you see only 4 or 5 people showing up, you know it didn't work. And you have an obligation to get the word out. None of that happened.
No. And you don't always have to follow the exact letter of the law, the 200 feet or whatever you said it was. You can obviously send it out tomorrow. You can post it on Facebook. There are other outlets. But the legal notice it's so antiquated now that I think it's kind of a way to cover your you-know-what if you just post it there because you're doing your due diligence in theory. But are you? You're not. So the residents really at this point have no say in this being in their backyard?
Limited. It's very limited. We did go to the town board meeting last week. We were allowed to speak. We probably had, like I said, about 60 people, maybe 10 speakers, because you're just kind of repeating after that. And we spoke to the people. We just said, listen, we don't want to be repeating things, but we need to get our message across.
Right.
So they did allow us to do that. There's a town planning board meeting coming up next week. Asked the town attorney, who's also the attorney for the town planning board, if we'd be allowed to speak, and he said, I don't know.
Oh, wow.
And I said, we better.
Right. Have you found, and I don't know how much interaction you've had with the companies that are proposing the solar power, what have they, maybe historically, if you've heard, are they doing anything to make it easier on the residents, meaning visually, like, so it's not directly in your backyard? But I know storage is a little different because they almost have to put it where they can find it at this point.
Yeah, they do. They talk about buffers. They talk about plantings so that you don't see it from the road. That type of thing. But that's about it.
Yeah. Okay. So is there any scenario, and I don't know if you know the answer, so I might be putting you on the spot, because this has been pushed so much by New York State and specifically Governor Hochul, is that why there's such a kind of a mad dash on all this? Because they would have the overall say in much of this, wouldn't they?
Well, yes, I believe that is it. Governor Hochul, New York State has created this self-imposed deadline of 2040 maybe,
Yeah,
something like
something
that,
like
to
that,
be
yeah.
70% electric. It's and they don't have the grid to support it.
Not at all.
So then they offered incentives, tax incentives, to these companies. So you have your state tax incentives, you have your federal tax credits,
Right.
and some of these companies have earned so many credits
Okay.
that they then sell them
Okay.
to other at 90 cents on a dollar.
Yeah.
So it's very lucrative for these companies.
Of course.
And then the companies, depending on the size of the project, will go to the local IDAs under the guise of an economic development project. And the IDAs give them sales tax abatements, real property tax
Sure.
abatements. And there are no jobs being created.
No,
It's
it really isn't.
No, I don't consider it economic development personally.
No. And it just sounds like we're going to see more and more of this in our communities. What would you recommend to people who maybe this hasn't directly affected them yet, but are watching it closely? What would you recommend that they do?
Well, I think the first and most important thing for all the municipalities is to have a comprehensive plan.
Yes.
The comprehensive plan is the Bible for any planning board.
Right.
Now, you have some bedroom communities. Town of Elmira is a bedroom community. Yeah. They have very few real issues, and that's great. And they've been like that for a lot of years. I mean, and, they're used to how many pickleball courts should we have?
Right,
that type of thing.
Yeah.
So this where you have a project that comes in that will change the makeup of a neighborhood for decades. These are long-term projects. The comprehensive plan is a very important document for a planning board. And for a planning board to move forward with these types of projects absent a comprehensive plan is dangerous.
Yeah.
The comprehensive plans are a product of not only the elected officials, but also the community and other public service agencies. It could be the Red Cross, it could be the Chamber of Commerce, whatever, coming to the table and saying, whatever their thoughts are on the makeup of that community or what they would like to see and so on. So I think that is the most important thing to have before you move forward with a project.
And I know the city of Corning is actually going through that project right now with the comprehensive plan. Is there anything that these local town boards and city councils can do on a moratorium?
They can.
Yeah.
And there are some in effect right now. Town of Chemung had one. It has expired since then, but they did their due diligence through the moratorium to come up with a plan where they're happy with what they have. Town of Veteran is currently in a moratorium, about ready to expire. Town of Big Flats has a moratorium, about ready to expire, but they're going to extend it to finish the process. They need a couple more months of due diligence, I guess. And Town of Burin also had one in Chemung County.
Okay, so if people are watching that are on any of these town boards, start the process because it's not a quick process.
Oh no. It takes 3 months just to start the process,
right?
Because you have to have public hearings and go to the county planning board and all of that. Yeah.
Because but going back to your point, I think when people hear about this, they want to know more about it. They want to know why, because it's fine if it's on somebody's farm that you never see, but boy, when it comes in your backyard and you weren't ready for it, that's a big difference.
Yeah, and I'm not anti-solar.
I understand.
But there's a place for them, and it's not in a residential neighborhood.
No.
And I've also argued that by putting them in a residential neighborhood, it devalues properties.
I would agree.
And they just blow that right off. I had an appraiser come to my house, do an appraisal of my property for estate planning purposes.
Yeah.
And this proposed site is in the town of Mars, right across the road from me. And he knew about it, and he said, where's the solar farm? And I said, it's going to be right over there. And he said, it hasn't been approved. And I said, no, it hasn't been approved yet. And he said, well, if it's approved, I'd like you to give me a call. I'll have to do an addendum to your report.
Oh, wow.
He says, you're going to lose 5 to 25% of your value.
Yeah.
Now, this is coming, and I have a lot of respect for this guy. And when I say that to elected officials and so on, they basically laugh at you.
I know. The eyes glaze over and they don't care.
Yeah.
But I mean, think about all those years you've paid property taxes, you've done your job as a good citizen, and then just like that, with a decision, you have solar panels in your backyard, and that house doesn't have the value that you had hoped it to have maybe for retirement or to give on to future generations. That's why I think, like everything going on in New York and at the federal level, there's so much stuff being thrown at us. This is something that I think is not on everybody's radar, but it should be, because it's going to affect them pretty soon.
Yeah, I mean, Senator Tom O'Mara.
Yeah.
We contacted his office, telling him what was going on. He wrote a letter to the Elmira Town Board and Elmira Town Planning Board, and pointed out issues with battery storage and solar and so on, and came right out and said, I support denying this project. I mean, it's just they're coming too fast and furious.
They are. You know, I always equate things like this, and I know it sounds completely different, but when they legalized marijuana in New York, and look how bad that went. Right? Mm-hmm. It always seems like in New York we put the cart before the horse.
That's exactly that's exactly it.
And this is going to be bad, because this is one that has become such a hot button issue that Hochul obviously doesn't want this to fail, her mandates on this. But as you said, the grid's not there, the technology is not there. So in the meantime, we're going to have a lot of projects that come through just trying to meet that demands, and I just don't see how it's possible.
Yeah, I mean, in this site in Elmira, there's 24 acres of forest.
Yeah.
The habitat displacement,
it's
just being ignored.
It's amazing when you have what is being done under environmentalism and how much negative impact that has on the environment. The battery storage alone, I think, should scare most people. We'll put that aside. You lived in a residential area that had beautiful forests, and now it's going to be solar panels.
Yeah.
Well, is there anything, just before we go, is there anything that people can do? Is it?
People, it's the responsibility of those elected officials to get that word out. Mm-hmm. I mean, they're there to represent the community.
Exactly.
Not a solar company and an individual property owner.
No.
And that is what's going on, because they're the only two who benefit from this. That's basically, there might be some agreement, host community agreement with the solar company.
But still.
But the cost benefit,
no,
it's just not there.
No, it's not there. And that's why people have to pay attention to, and I know it's hard to do, but do your best to stay up to date on planning board, town boards. I know it's not always the most exciting, but like you said, sometimes it's too late once you finally learn about a project. Well, John, thanks so much for being on the program. I hope I didn't take up too much of your time.
No.
Best of luck.
No, thank you very much for having me.
Let's do it again in the future, all right?
Okay.
How's that?
Sure.
All right.
All right.
Well, all right, we'll be right back. Frankly Speaking, stay with us. The Frankly Speaking Roof Cam, brought to you by Boss Security in Horseheads. Contact them today for all your business and home security needs. We are broadcasting live from the Hesselson studio. Let's go through a couple of comments from viewers. Good morning, Frank. Well, good morning. If you want to see a total misuse of cancer research funds, you go through the see-through site on New York's website that shows all the salaries of New York State employees. Click on payrolls. You can see how much money goes to the top CEOs and presidents of prominent cancer research. Thank you very much for that tidbit. Comment from a different viewer, Jack. He's wondering what happens to all the solar material when it's outlived its lifespan. Does it go into our local landfills? Great question. And thank you to John Burin for being our guest on the program. Boy, where else can you get coverage of the speech at the joint session of Congress, to congressional, or to COs, strike, to local interviews like that. But it's very important. So if you know anybody that is, or if you go to the town board meetings, express your concern to, and I know Assemblyman Phil Palmisano brought up in the past, that it has to be highlighted. There has to be the conversation. So thank you again to John Burin for being on the program. Okay, so back to Trump's speech. Scott Jennings at CNN said this was a horrific night for the opposition party. Democrats came into the speech lost and defeated by Donald Trump. It looks to me like they're even more lost and even more defeated than when the speech started. Jeff Blair from the National Review said these speeches never matter. They are always forgotten by the end of the week. But by the terms they are typically judged, this was clearly a successful night for Trump. His delivery, perhaps because he had to stick to a script, boy, that's a tongue twister, was a touch low energy, but he still had his wit. Britt Hume said, if you ever doubted that Donald Trump is the colossus, the political colossus of our time and our nation, this night and this speech should have put that to rest. The Democrats seem to be falling into a trap after trap as he recognized the people and celebrated the people he pointed to in the gallery, while the Democrats sat glumly on their hands throughout all of it. It was a terrible look. Al Green's attempt to disrupt the speech was a bad look for the Democrats. This was, I think, politically speaking, this was pretty powerful stuff. And that's why I think many in leadership said don't go kind of the absurd route in the protesting, the Democrat leadership. But now that the extremists have kind of taken over the party, that warning was not heeded. Lawmakers are saying America is back. House Majority Leader Steve Scalise said President Trump was phenomenal. He laid out so many things he's done in just 6 weeks, but also that he's ahead for the American people to get our country back on track. Senator Katie Britt said, I was so disappointed that my Democrat colleagues couldn't stand and show love for some of the Americans that were recognized tonight. That was really heartbreaking to me. You have a little 13-year-old boy with brain cancer who worked diligently to overcome that. For him, when his dad lifted him up, for him to look across that room and not have everyone in there standing for him was heartbreaking. Eric Schmidt said, America is back. The Democrats really embarrassed themselves. I mean, they wouldn't even stand up for DJ who survived cancer. The New York Post editorial board said that Trump's speech has Americans dreaming, which leaving Democrats reeling. It set a record as the longest presidential address. We've mentioned that at an hour and 40 minutes, but it never lagged. President Trump delivered a tour de force, putting a coherent and reassuring frame on his insanely busy first weeks in office, even as he made viewers laugh and cry, finishing up with an inspiring crescendo from the successes of America's past and present to his promised new golden age. Trump is beyond comfortable at the podium, shifting readily from casual and comical to formal and profound. He used all his talent to deliver a genuine barn burner, fundamentally reaffirming that he's on top of his game and reveling in his work. Democrats came off as hopeless from Al Green's ranting before being ejected to the pathetic round of protest signs. They held up all speech long for their insistence on sitting on their hands, even at the most uplifting moments, and we've mentioned that numerous times on the program. Also, Trump listed promises made and promises kept, with more promises keeping well in motion. He joked and inspired, assured his base, and baited the opposition. He spoke to the country, and he owned the room. It was one speech on one night, still early in his term, but Donald Trump did his cause and the nation as much good as he possibly could, assuring America that for all the sound, fury, and for many confusions of the early going, he is in total command, and he has America dreaming. The White House Office of Communications put together some of the highlights of what people were saying about the speech. According to CBS, of all places, 76% of Americans approved of the speech, while a CNN poll showed 69% of Americans had a positive reaction. Speaker Johnson said tonight President Trump made his triumphant return to Congress to share his bold, optimistic vision for renewing the American dream. Ted Cruz said, this is the 5th State of the Union address I've seen Trump give. It is by far his best. And we don't have to go through all of these, but even people that are not normally fans of his, like Chris Cillizza, saying that was a very effective speech. You can hate him, or you can hate it or him, but the speech was aimed squarely at issues where the public is with Trump and filled with made-for-sharing moments. A master image maker at work, and you can hate him and acknowledge that's true. Clay Travis saying this is the best speech of Donald Trump's career. Just a phenomenal litany of common sense and rational leadership. Great and heartwarming guests. It's a grand slam. Again, I'm not going to go through all of these because it is 8 pages long. But the Secretary of State, Marco Rubio, said an inspiring and momentous speech. The president returned to the White House with a clear mandate from the American people to renew the American dream. His address tonight laid out exactly how he is keeping those promises with a vision of peace through strength and a stronger, safer, and more prosperous, United States. A lot of people. Oh, let's hear from Elise Stefanik. UN Ambassador Designate Elise Stefanik said, in just 1 month under President Trump, Americans have experienced record results in the renewal of the American dream, with the triumphant return of strong leadership to the Oval Office. From securing the border to cutting wasteful spending of our hard-earned taxpayer dollars to reasserting America First peace through strength, leadership to the world stage, President Trump has delivered the most exceptional first month of American presidency in history. Promises made, promises kept. The American Golden Age is here, and our friend EPA Administrator Lee Zeldin saying the vision of President Trump will usher in the greatest 4 years in American history. Honored to be part of this amazing cabinet working hard to restore our nation to glory. We will continue to do my part at the EPA to power the great American comeback. So those are just a couple of quick. We had some of the negatives that people had on it early on. Oh, hey, Claudia Tenney. Some of you in this viewing audience, that is your representative. Representative Claudia Tenney said, "This is one of the most tremendous experiences of my life. Donald Trump hit it out of the park." So he put, like I said, it's 8 pages of various representatives, various public figures, and what they had to say. Now, moving along from the speech, and feel free at any moment to continue talking about the speech. I think we just have quite a few other things that we have to cover. Now, the IRS is drafting a plan to slash 90,000 person workforce in half, according to a report. The tax collecting agency, and this is one that the media kept presenting to you as you would be upset about it, that you would be concerned, that you'd be scared. The DOJ was involved with the IRS. The Trump administration plans to reallocate some IRS employees to the Department of Homeland Security, where they will assist with immigration enforcement, a request DHS Secretary Christie Noem made to Treasury Secretary Scott Bessent last month. The layoffs are part of a DOJ-led effort by the Trump administration to quickly shrink the size of government by shuttering federal agencies, firing probationary workers with less than 1 year on the job, and incentivizing federal employees to leave their post through a deferred resignation program. So half of the 90,000 person workforce at the IRS, half of the staff will be cut with this new DOJ plan. DOJ also announced that there's a government agency staff that has been trimmed down to just one being the statutory minimum. The Department of Government Efficiency announced yesterday that the Inter-American Foundation has removed all but one employee from its payroll in order to comply with President Trump's executive orders on reducing federal bureaucracy. The headcount at the independent federal agency prior to the downsizing was 48, and the average employee salary, so 48 employees. The average employee salary was $131,000 per year. DOJ tweeted the Inter-American Foundation, an agency whose primary action was to issue foreign grants, $60 million budget, has been reduced to its statutory minimum, one active employee. And this ties in because I know I missed a couple of comments when we were talking with John Burin, and I don't want to miss those because there's a couple of really good points. Ken writes in, Frank, I was astonished when you said that one of the Democrats' obstructionists said that Trump said there was $50 billion of waste, but they only tallied up $16 billion from the speech. Let me be clear, Ken. That wasn't from the speech. I'm saying in the past that was a typical refrain from the media. So it wasn't about the speech. I haven't seen a tally from the speech. But what they had been saying early on in DOJ, especially when the website first came on and they were being transparent, they'd say, well, this changed or this isn't really accurate, whatever. And again, I'm not using accurate numbers here, but just showing you how the media reacts. They'll say, well, they claim 80 billion has been cut, but it's only been 20 billion. And you go, well, I'm still happy with the 20 billion. I mean, is that a negative? So I'm glad you gave me an opportunity, Ken, to clarify that. That wasn't in the speech. But apparently they couldn't comprehend that the address was only 2 hours long and Trump was just hitting some of the most erroneous fraud and waste. If the sheeple want a more complete list, they only need to go to Doge.gov to review it. A note of caution, it's a long list, so pack a lunch before settling down to read it. Yes, what a great website, and I think what a great idea. So I'm glad you gave me an opportunity to highlight that, Ken. I had another one, and I'm missing it. Here it is. My favorite moment in the speech was about immigration when Trump said, it turns out we didn't need legislation. We needed a different president. Yes, there's a couple ones that were very interesting throughout all of that. Now, GOP Senate leader John Thune publicly nudged Elon Musk to delegate at least some of his DOJ cutback efforts to Trump administration officials better attuned to the task. I think that he's kind of going about business as he would in a private business. What he is trying to achieve is to try and figure out ways that we can make government cost less, run more efficiently, modernize it with technology. But while lauding DOJ's efforts, he stressed that how they go about it matters. DOJ is going about this and doing this big scrub. We worked so hard to get cabinet people in place, hand it off to these leaders, these managers who are going to be making the decisions. And they're going to be, I think, probably better attuned. Your thoughts on that? But we got to take a short break. We'll read some more of your comments. When we come back, stay with us. This is Frankly Speaking here on WYDC TV. Big Fox, we will be right back. The Frankly Speaking Roof Cam brought to you by Boss Security and Horseheads. Contact them today for all your business and home security needs. Welcome back as we broadcast live from the Hesselson studio. A couple comments from viewers. Frank, of course New York and California want to offer fired federal bureaucrats jobs. They have already been vetted. They're either diehard Democrats or lazy. Perfect to be in lockstep with the elected Democrats that are ruining both states. Thank you, Ken. Comment from a different viewer. Frank, if you're not for cutting half the people in the IRS, you're not American. Thank you very much. Now, the House GOP is urging its members to do more virtual town halls, as we've seen protests for in-person town halls, saying it is not a good use of tax-paying dollars. Representative Darrell Issa said the town halls in the years leading up to our majority proved to be a bad idea because the union thugs, including the leaders of the SEIU and people backed by George Soros, found that it was an opportunity for them to get press and for them to not let people speak and get answered their questions. And that is one of the problems. They're organized groups. Some are paid, some aren't. And what happens is, they go there, they know they can shout. It's not about having a conversation or learning about what Musk is doing or what Doge is doing or where their representative stands. It's about shouting and screaming so they get the coverage. And we've already brought to you how many examples of it, where they'll say in a red district, his constituents turned on him, trying to signal that the American people are against the MAGA agenda. Or they'll show the videos and say, outrage throughout the country tonight. It's very predictable. He also went on to say, every member is free to choose to do town halls, but that he is advising people that if they're being interrupted in that way, in an organized way, then it's not a good use of taxpayer dollars. Now, where do we want to go from here? Kind of to tie in with that, with the media and the bias coming from the Hill, Max Burns offered an opinion piece saying Trump's pride cometh before a fall. Donald Trump is president at the height of his political power and well aware of it. After a month spent disrupting federal agencies, laying off thousands of veterans and publicly humiliating Ukrainian President Zelensky in the Oval Office, Trump clearly feels untouchable. But his recent MAGA history so often reminds us Trump's most overconfident moments tend to precede his most spectacular missteps. After all, it was a reckless and questionable phone call to Zelensky that landed Trump in his first of two impeachments. Now his ego-driven fumbles risk further inflaming an already divided and unstable world order. Some golden age. Again, proving that these people have not learned. It goes back where the person that gave the response, the senator that gave the response after the speech last night, saying that, yes, Americans want change, but, and that's why things don't ever change. I'm not going to go through this piece, but just to show you kind of the grasping for straws, much like the grasping for straws, just like the grasping for straws that we saw yesterday during the State of the Union. Well, not technically State of the Union, but we don't have to get into that. But the speech to the joint session of Congress, it was quite a show. We're going to wrap things up. Get your last minute. We got some last minute waves coming in. Get your last minute comments coming in as we wrap up today's edition of Frankly Speaking. I think I'm going to wrap up actually on some New York State issues because we kind of glanced over them this morning. Your thoughts on the CO rally yesterday in Albany. I know there was a counter protest in the Capitol that was, I would say, it's fair to say, not well attended. But they got a great spot in the Capitol to make them look bigger. I would argue that there was probably more people at the anti-Trump rally here on Market Street yesterday than were at the pro-halt rally. But if you look at the videos from the corrections officers rally side of things, what an amazing amount of people, a big group in Albany. You also had Senator Tom O'Mara giving a rousing speech. So we can talk about that as well as we wrap up today's edition. We've got a couple things here just quickly about New York State. We could talk, wrap up on the discussion if you want about the speech last night. I think we've covered that extensively. But stay with us. We'll be right back with Frankly Speaking here on WYDC TV. Big Fox, stay with us. The Frankly Speaking Roof Cam brought to you by Boss Security and Horseheads. Contact them today for all your business and home security needs. We are wrapping up today's edition of Frankly Speaking as we broadcast live from the Hesselson's studio. A couple comments here, I think, from viewers. Larry from Corning. Remember the striking guards in 1980 got fired? Well, I know the union got fined. I thought there was some type of litigation where they got their money back. I didn't know they got fired. I did not know that. Thank you, if that's the case. I thought it was more of the union got a huge fine, and they ended up all coming to an agreement after. I think it was 16 days, right? Comment from a different viewer. Doge fires useless federal workers and Hochul hires them. Seems like she wants to make a rationale for Trump to totally eliminate the SALT deductions. Good point. Thank you. To that point, the New York Post editorial board, and this got lost in the shuffle yesterday. It came in late, no, not late yesterday, afternoon yesterday, but obviously there were so many stories specifically on the speech. But the New York Post editorial board says Governor Hochul is playing her resistance air horn yet again. If you recall, I mentioned on the program yesterday that she said that she is the leader of the resistance to Trump, saying, quote, once you draw first blood on us, you know we're coming back hard, and I will be leading the resistance on policies like these when you're hurting New Yorkers directly. Man, she takes a strong stance on taxes. This was in reference to congestion pricing. She thinks that that's a winning issue for her, but nonsense. A lot more New Yorkers feel harmed directly by her tolls and by Trump's drive to kill them. And chronic fence sitting, difference splitter, Hochul, looks ridiculous, posing as a fearless anti-Trump warrior, as in an insanely lame Rambo-themed ad from her campaign. And that was a cringe-worthy ad if you had not seen it. But yes, I mean, here we go. She's talking tough. The two issues she's standing strong on: taxing you, the hard workers of New York, and really giving it to the corrections officers. Not to mention that less than 2 weeks back, she was insisting her role vis-a-vis Trump is as a pragmatic diplomat. Quote, I've been asked countless times, are you leading the resistance? No, I'm governing the great state of New York, Hochul said. Actually, it's all posturing, like pretty much everything from this governor, but she's just not good at it. She says whatever she happens to think will, right at the moment, score her some instant brownie points and prop up her dismal approval ratings. Example, 57% of state voters in last month's Siena poll want to see someone other than Hochul run in 2026, which makes her desperate effort to do righteous anger all the more laughable. Where she's serious, she's been drastically out of step with what voters want. Trump won the presidential election convincingly and improved his support in New York State and city to historic levels by explicitly rejecting the progressive politics at which Hochul's gesturing. Voters don't want high crime, infinite illegal immigration, and skyrocketing prices. Hochul, and any other Democrat still doing resistance theater, needs to grow up and get over the fact that Trump won. The governor could just put on a front and try to get the Empire State back on track. But it's clear that empty rhetoric and political point scoring are her real priorities, not governing. House Democrats have urged, and you can find this at the New York Post, have urged Governor Hochul to pump brakes on impractical electric car edict. So it's not just Republicans. Some Democrats joined the Republican colleagues in urging her to slow down on this timeline, forcing New Yorkers to switch from gas-powered cars to emission-free electric autos. Saying slow down. Now, whether or not this gets any traction, only time will tell. There's a piece at Vanity Fair talking about the inside the Democrat race to stop Andrew Cuomo. This year's New York City mayoral election is already shaping up to be a fight for attention and name recognition, and against a former governor everyone knows all too well. Oh, did you see, as a matter of fact, Senator Gillibrand, so wishy-washy, Senator Gillibrand. She says, it's up to New York voters, it's not up to me, meaning the mayoral race. Cuomo has a lot of talent as an executive. He's been a very strong governor, but he has admitted and he has said he's made mistakes, serious mistakes. Now, we know at one time Gillibrand was very much at the forefront of the Me Too movement. That changed. First, she threw the Clintons under the bus, and then now we see a little change of pace when it comes to people like Cuomo. All right, we are out of time for today's edition of Frankly Speaking. Thank you to John Burin for being our guest. He is the majority leader, Chemung County Legislature. Appreciate him being on the program to tell us about the importance of getting ahead of the solar-powered battery storage. So we thank him for being on the program. I thank you for all the comments, all the waves. Great discussion this morning. Different opinion on a lot of issues, from COs to the president's speech, so I always appreciate that. And I ask you to join me every weekday morning. We're going to have a busy end of the week. It's already Wednesday, so we have a busy next 2 days, and I hope that you'll be a part of it. Every weekday morning, starting at 6 a.m. for Frankly Speaking, only on WYDC TV Big Fox. We will see you tomorrow morning, bright and early. I look forward to it already.